Hey everyone! Tonight, we begin with a wedding perfect lighting, silk napkins, and champagne flutes tall enough to signal aircraft. Picture this. I'm standing at the entrance of a grand ballroom, dressed in a soft gray dress that whispers respectable widow, clutching a beaded clutch and wearing my grandmother's pearls like armor. I'm smiling for the cameras, but what I really want is to disappear. Not because I'm overwhelmed, but because they've hidden me at table 12 behind an obnoxiously large flower arrangement that could easily camouflage a small SUV. You might not survive this one. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. They seated me behind a curtain of hibiscus and hydrangeas like I was a shameful secret. The mother of the bride me shoved into exile like I was going to ruin their Pinterest-perfect backdrop. I took my seat silently, eyes scanning the mirror across the ballroom. From the reflection, I could see them all, my daughter Melissa, floating down the aisle like something from a bridal magazine, and Cameron Steele, her new husband, dressed in a tux worth more than my car. Now, I know how to read a room, and I know how to read a man. Cameron had a smile for every category of guest, the full megawatt beam for the wealthy donors, a practiced nod for the politically useful, and a quick glance for anyone he didn't deem profitable. He barely acknowledged me. I was just the old lady who came with the bride. Charming. During the reception, he glided through the guests like a seasoned fundraiser. Then, suddenly, he was at my table. "Mrs. Monroe?" he said, voice sweet enough to rot your teeth. "Isn't this magical?" "Oh, absolutely," I replied. "I've never seen so many orchids in one room without a funeral." He chuckled like I'd said something clever, then leaned in slightly. I was hoping we could get to know each other better. Maybe dinner this week. I looked him over. Young, handsome, too polished. The kind of man who sells things ideas, futures, people. How refreshingly retro. I said, "A post-marriage introduction?" "Sure. Thursday work for you?" "Perfect." He beamed. "I know a quiet place downtown. Private? Good for meaningful conversations?" "Private? Of course." I smiled and nodded. But inside, gears were turning. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a lukewarm cup of decaf, replaying the exchange. My gut whispered, he's planning something. See, here's the thing. Old age doesn't make you naive. It just makes people assume you are. And while some women collect cats or knit blankets, I collect observations. Little things. Like how Cameron never looked people in the eye unless he was about to ask them for something. Or how he checked his watch not out of boredom, but like he was counting down to a scheduled move. Thursday night arrived like the opening scene of a slow-burn thriller. I wore my simple black dress, the one with subtle pearls stitched along the sleeves, understated, classic, and very deceptive. I met him at one of those restaurants where the menus are bound in leather and the water has an accent. Cameron stood as I arrived, guiding me to the table like a well-trained maitre d'. We made small talk over red wine. He asked about my hobbies. I made up a fictional bridge club. My home, the one Martin and I built over 40 years. And eventually, my financial health. Casually, of course. "You know," he said, swirling his Cabernet like a sommelier on Instagram, "a lot of older folks get taken advantage of these days. You ever worry about that?" "Not often," I replied. "But it's nice to know someone's watching out for me." He smiled like a man who just heard the starting bell. "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about." Out came the manila folder, thick papers clipped neatly, legal looking, harmless enough to a stranger. But I'm not a stranger. I'm a retired estate planner with a memory sharp enough to beat most trivia champions. Inside that folder, a carefully constructed trap. Power of attorney, financial control, healthcare directive, total life control, all under the guise of protection. I closed the folder gently. "Well, this is a lot," I said, keeping my tone light. Of course," he nodded. "I brought a notary with me. She's waiting outside, just in case you're ready to sign tonight. Totally your choice." I looked him in the eye. and it took everything in me not to laugh. That's very efficient of you. He nodded again, maybe thinking he'd won. But what Cameron didn't know is that the game hadn't even started yet. Not mine, anyway. When I got home, I pulled out an old envelope from my safe. One Martin had labeled in his careful handwriting. Open if anyone tries to control you. Inside were contact details, lawyers, trusts, bank accounts I never knew existed. Martin always said the best protection is preparation. He'd planned for this, for exactly this. And now so would I. By Friday morning, I'd already placed 3 very important phone calls, one to Carol Hastings, Martin's old estate attorney, one to my nephew Theo, a digital forensics consultant with an alarming knowledge of surveillance tech, and one to my local locksmith, because if I was going to do this properly, I needed to start with locks. While Cameron probably thought he was 2 steps ahead, I was quietly building the chessboard he didn't even know he was standing on. And let me tell you, widows with nothing to lose are experts at quiet construction. Carol met me for coffee at a little corner spot near the courthouse. She arrived in a wool coat that looked like it belonged to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and carried a leather portfolio that screamed, "Don't mess with me." After one look at the paperwork Cameron had presented, she set down her espresso and sighed. "This is predatory garbage," she said plainly. "It's wrapped in legal-sounding fluff, but he's trying to strip you of every right you have and hand it all to himself. Classic inheritance shortcut." I raised an eyebrow. "So not technically illegal." She smirked. "Not until it is, especially if we can prove intent, which I suspect we will." I nodded. "Then I'd like to do more than not sign it. I want to set a trap." Her eyes twinkled. "Now you're speaking my language." Over the next week, Carol helped me quietly consolidate my accounts, locking everything behind new authorizations, double verification, and trustee protections Martin had set up years ago. Apparently, my late husband had foreseen this possibility long before either of us had met Cameron. "You know what Martin told me," Carol said as we went through the documents. "He said if anyone tried to make you a victim, he wanted you to have everything you needed to turn it into a war." That man, he loved me so much. He planned an entire counterattack in advance, and I never even knew. Meanwhile, Theo helped me set up a discreet surveillance system. Tiny cameras placed in common areas. Motion-activated audio triggers, nothing flashy. Just enough to document if, or when, Cameron made another move. And I was counting on it. By Tuesday. Emma called again, her voice chipper but edged with concern. "Mom, have you signed the papers Cameron gave you?" "Not yet," I said, folding laundry with one hand and holding the phone with the other. "I'm still thinking." He's anxious. About you. About protecting the family." I smiled at my socks. "Of course he is." Emma paused. "Are you mad at him?" "Not yet." That seemed to satisfy her. Wednesday, I called Cameron. "I've decided," I told him, letting my voice quiver just enough to sound sincere. "You're right. I'm vulnerable. I don't want to be taken advantage of. Maybe it's best if someone I trust helps manage things." There was a beat of silence, and then a warmth entered his voice that made my skin crawl. "I'm so glad. Sylvia, you won't regret this." I asked him to bring the notary again, just to get it done quickly. "Oh, of course. I'll take care of everything." And then he hung up, probably thinking he'd won. But he didn't see Carol sitting across from me, nor Theo in the corner, reviewing audio setups. He didn't hear the slow creak of old wheels turning, or feel the hush before the hammer drops. He didn't know that every word he said was going to be preserved like amber fossilized evidence of his own stupidity. When he arrived Thursday afternoon, he came bearing flowers and a bottle of Chardonnay. The notary followed, quiet and polite, her eyes flicking between us like she already sensed something wasn't quite right. "Let's make this official," Cameron said, laying out the documents with the same practiced efficiency he'd probably used a dozen times before. "Just sign here and here." I took the pen, held it over the first page, paused, and smiled. "You know, Cameron," I said softly, "before we do this, I just want to thank you." He blinked. Thank me. Yes, for confirming exactly what I needed to know. That you're not just opportunistic, you're a full-blown predator. The notary froze. He glanced at her, then at me. Excuse me. From the bookshelf behind me, Theo stepped forward, holding up a tiny, blinking device. You've been recorded. This conversation, the one last week, and every word of your offer. Recorded. Cameron's smile cracked. That's entrapment. Actually, Carol said, entering from the kitchen, this is a one-party consent state. And guess what Sylvia's that party? Cameron went pale. You set me up. No, dear, I said, sliding the unsigned papers back toward him. You set yourself up. I just gave you the opportunity. He stood abruptly, knocking over the chair. This is insane. I was trying to help. Carol opened her folder. And I've got the forged notary schedule that says otherwise. Cameron looked like he wanted to say something, anything. But then Theo stepped forward, a USB drive in hand. This has the audio. You used the phrase, she's too old to notice 3 times in 1 hour. And there it was. The final thread in his carefully stitched story finally snapped. I suggest you leave, I said, standing, because the next knock at your door won't be mine. It'll be from people wearing badges. He hesitated just long enough to make it dramatic, then turned and stormed out. The notary apologized, profusely. I told her it wasn't her fault. When the house was quiet again, I poured a glass of that Chardonnay, sat at the table, and looked at the paperwork that had almost stolen my life. And I toasted to the fact that I didn't just dodge the bullet, I caught it, labeled it, and mailed it back returned to sender. Let this be your reminder, never underestimate the quiet ones behind the centerpiece at table 12. We're not hiding. We're watching. The headlines hit the local paper by Sunday morning socialite's son-in-law under investigation for elder fraud scheme. Below it, a pixelated photo of Cameron in his perfect suit, one hand shielding his face from the camera. Honestly, it was the most accurate photo of him I'd ever seen caught mid-lie. Emma called by noon, her voice sharp and brittle, like frozen glass. Mom, what the hell is going on? I sipped my coffee slowly. Do you want the calm version or the truth with swearing version? Cameron is furious. He says you're trying to ruin him. You set him up. No, I said calmly. He walked right into the setup. I just happened to be holding the blueprint. Emma groaned. I don't understand. Why didn't you talk to me first? I tried, Emma, but love clouds judgment. And frankly, you've always had a blind spot for shiny men with practiced smiles. That stung. I could feel it across the phone line. But sometimes truth has sharp corners. She exhaled, shaky. I need to figure this out. You will, I told her. And when you're ready, we'll talk. But not while he's standing in your kitchen spinning his own story. I hung up before she could respond, then turned to Theo, who was at the kitchen table, scanning documents with an expression that only tech nerds and puzzle fanatics wear. Anything useful? Oh yeah, he said. We pulled metadata off Cameron's cloud backups. Turns out your charming son-in-law was organizing shell companies and filing fake invoices from at least 3 other clients. My eyebrows lifted. Clients, as in elderly women? One's 84. Her grandson is listed as an emergency contact on everything. I spoke to him, he thought his grandma was just being dramatic. She wasn't. I sat down. Let's get Carol on the line. 2 hours later, the investigation had officially moved into multi-victim status. Carol sent everything to Agent Mia Landry at the State Attorney General's office, and within 48 hours, there were murmurs of a grand jury. The walls were closing in. But if I've learned anything in my 74 years, it's that people like Cameron don't go down quietly. They flail, and flailing people do dumb things. Sure enough, Thursday morning, I opened the door to find him standing there. No smile, no flowers, just a face carved from panic. We need to talk, he said. I stepped aside. Then come in and use your words carefully. He sat on the edge of the sofa like a man who suddenly realized his parachute was a handbag. I didn't mean for this to get so out of hand. I folded my arms. Which part? The manipulation, the fraud, or the part where you tried to have me declared mentally unfit in your little power of attorney draft. His jaw twitched. I was under pressure. From who? The debt collectors, the private poker games in West Palm. You think don't show up on banking statements. He blinked. Yes, sweetheart, we knew. You don't understand. Sylvia, I was trying to secure our future. Emma and I... Stop! I said it with a softness that dropped the temperature 10 degrees. You were trying to steal my future, and you were willing to gaslight your own wife to do it. He looked away for a long moment. The silence was full of all the things he couldn't lie about anymore. I came to offer a deal. Now I laughed. A deal with the woman you tried to warehouse and rob? I'll cooperate. With the other cases. The AG, if you drop the charges. Oh, darling, I said, rising. I'm not the one you make that deal with anymore. The case is out of my hands. His lips parted slightly. You what? I stepped closer. You came here hoping I still had power over this. That you could charm or threaten your way out. But you miscalculated again. I don't own this case anymore. The state does. I'm just the very compelling, very sympathetic star witness who looks great on camera and has no reason to lie. The door creaked open behind me, and Carol stepped in. We've got everything we need, she said. He can leave now. Cameron stood. You'll regret this. I tilted my head. You know what I used to regret not telling Emma the truth sooner. But now, watching you squirm kind of makes up for it. He left without another word. That night, Emma called. Her voice was quieter, smaller. Is it true? Everything they're saying about him? I closed my eyes and leaned back in my chair. Yes. I'm so sorry, Mom. There it was, the first crack in the wall. I know, I said gently. It's not your fault he fooled you, but what happens next is up to you. She was quiet. Then what do I do? You start by listening, and then, if you're ready, you start helping us make sure he never does this to another woman again. For a long time, there was just breathing. And then, okay. I hung up, then pulled the curtains shut. The storm was coming, and I was ready. The trial date was set for mid-September. Carol, Agent Landry, and Theo were working with surgical precision gathering, cataloging, deposing. You'd think we were building a case against a criminal mastermind. But that's the thing about these people. They're not brilliant. They're just bold, and they count on everyone else to be silent. Cameron underestimated 3 key things. 1. My memory. 2. My network. 3. My lack of interest in ever being manipulated again. By the time September rolled around, we had affidavits from 3 other women. One of them, a retired librarian named June, told her story like she was reciting a ghost tale from a rocking chair. He came over with wine and documents. She said it was for estate planning. Then he changed the passwords on my accounts and told me I was confused when I forgot the new ones. Classic and disgusting. June was 86, sharp as a tack, and ready to testify. When we told her she'd be in court, she replied, "Good, I want to wear red." As I prepared for my own testimony, I found myself writing in an old notebook Robert used to keep by the fireplace. Not for notes or to-do lists, but for thoughts he didn't want to say aloud, sometimes just a line or 2. That week I flipped it open and found a line in his handwriting. A good life is a quiet rebellion against people who think they own you. That was it? That was the mission now? On the morning of jury selection, I wore a navy pantsuit and the same pearls I wore to Emma's wedding. They looked different now, not soft or sentimental. They were armor. Emma met me at the courthouse. She wasn't wearing makeup, and I noticed the tan line on her ring finger where her wedding band had recently been. Her lips were tight, her eyes puffy. "You okay?" I asked. "No," she said, "but I'm here." That meant everything. The courtroom was colder than it needed to be. The kind of cold meant to keep you alert, to keep sweat at bay and truth under pressure. Cameron entered in a navy suit that hung too loose, like the skin of someone who used to be convincing. His jaw was clenched, but his eyes, they were darting. nervous. He scanned for allies and found none. He avoided my gaze. Theo leaned toward me and whispered, "He looks like a wet cat about to be deposed." I almost snorted. Almost. Opening arguments began. The state's attorney, Carla Reyes, stood like she'd done this 1,000 times. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she said, "this is not a story about misunderstanding or miscommunication. This is a story about premeditated manipulation, about a man who saw opportunity not in a business, but in a family." She paused, letting it sink. He targeted vulnerable women, not because they were weak, but because he thought they wouldn't fight back. I met her eyes for just a second. Challenge accepted. When it was my turn on the stand, the bailiff helped me step up. The courtroom felt like a theater, and for once in my life, I wasn't in the audience. I told them everything, from the accidental flower-obscured seating to the folder of power of attorney papers dropped like bait onto my coffee table. I explained how he tried to rush me, flatter me, guilt me, and finally, pressure me. And I told them what he didn't expect. That I'd kept records, that I'd seen a predator before, that I'd made a promise to myself never to be a helpless woman again, not for anyone. The courtroom was silent. "Did he try to isolate you?" Carla asked. "Yes. He positioned himself between me and my daughter. He used charm like a scalpel. But he forgot that intelligence isn't erased by age." "And why didn't you sign those documents?" I glanced toward Cameron. "Because even the best performance can't disguise a person's intentions forever. And eventually, everyone runs out of lines." When I stepped down, Cameron's attorney attempted a rebuttal blaming stress, confusion, family miscommunication. But the jury wasn't buying it. And when June took the stand wearing red, of course, she told them everything in 4 sentences. "He said I was forgetful. He said he'd take care of me. He took my passwords and called it protection. That's not caregiving. That's theft in a sweater." The gallery murmured. I wanted to applaud. Back in the hallway during recess, Emma stood beside me and asked quietly, "What if I'd stayed with him, believed him?" I touched her hand. "Then I'd still be here. And you'd still have found your way out. Because you're my daughter." She looked down. "I want to be like you when I'm older." "You already are," I said. The closing arguments were a blur, but the jury was not. It took them 5 hours, and when they returned, they handed down the verdict like thunder. Guilty. On all counts. Fraud, coercion, attempted elder abuse, false identity declarations. As they cuffed Cameron, he looked at me with a sneer that cracked into something I'd seen before: panic. "I could have made her life better," he said to no one in particular. I met his eyes. "No, Cameron, I made mine better the moment I decided you didn't belong in it." He left in shackles, I left in pearls. And that night, for the first time in months, I slept the whole night through. The weeks after the verdict were a strange blend of quiet and consequence. Cameron's sentencing hearing was scheduled for November, and in the meantime, I found myself fielding phone calls from reporters, advocates, even 2 university professors who wanted to quote me in their papers on elder financial exploitation. Apparently, I had become a compelling case study. Imagine that, after 73 years, I was finally someone's thesis. I spent most mornings on my porch again, with a real cup of coffee, not the weak hospital kind, and a stronger sense of peace. But the fight wasn't over. Not for the other women, and not for Emma. She was rebuilding. I watched her, sometimes from a careful distance. She'd sold the house she shared with Cameron, moved into a sunny little apartment across town, and started volunteering at a local senior center. "I owe the world a little good," she said. "You owe the world nothing," I replied, "but it's nice of you to give it something anyway." It wasn't all smooth. Emma had guilt. She'd been duped by him, after all, had defended him, slept beside him. "You saw what I didn't," she said one day as we unpacked her dishes. "How did you know?" I thought about that. Because people who are trying to help don't rush you. They don't ask for signatures before there's understanding. And they don't make you feel small to make themselves feel powerful. But he seemed so capable. Capable isn't the same as trustworthy. She nodded and returned to lining her cabinets. I could see the questions still flickering in her eyes, but they were quieter now, less haunting. Meanwhile, Carol had been busy. She dropped by my house one afternoon with a bottle of sparkling cider and a folder marked Restitution Recovery Proposal. "I've got something you're going to love," she said, setting the folder on my coffee table like a magician about to reveal a rabbit. "Is this about Cameron?" I asked. "It's about everyone like him." Carol explained her plan: create a nonprofit legal aid fund that would help elderly people fight back against manipulation, coercion, and financial abuse. Free legal advice, helplines, workshops for caregivers and families, all backed by a grant she wanted me to seed. "You're asking me for money," I said, not unkindly. "I'm asking you to turn your experience into a resource." I opened the folder. Inside were sample budgets, projected impact stats, a name for the program, the Hartley Fund. "My name?" I asked, blinking. "Your story has made an impact. Sylvia, let's make it a legacy." I sat back and stared at the name. It felt surreal, like I was floating above my own life. "Do you think this would have helped you?" I asked. Carol smiled. "I think it would have helped a lot of people like you, and it might have made predators think twice." I didn't say yes that day. I needed to think about it, to sit with the weight of what it meant. But by the following morning, I'd written a check that would make my accountant faint. Legacy was calling, and I was finally ready to answer. Later that week, I got a call from June, the woman in red from the trial. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "Before this, I thought I was just a fool. Now I know I was targeted. There's a difference." "There is," I said, "and I hope you wear red every day." She laughed. "I just might." November crept in with cold wind and golden leaves. The sentencing hearing arrived like a ghost knocking on the door of closure. I went with Emma and Carol, both flanking me like bodyguards in business casual. Cameron looked different. Thinner, paler, more human. That was the surprising part. He didn't seem like a villain anymore. He seemed like someone who'd fallen off the map of his own morality. But I wasn't there for him. I was there for the other women, for the homes he tried to steal, for the trust he shattered with every forged signature and fake smile. The judge addressed the court, summarizing the crimes, the evidence, the consequences. Mr. Bennett used charm and familial connection to manipulate elderly individuals into surrendering control of their lives. She said, "Such abuse is not just financial, it's emotional, psychological, and deeply damaging." Then she turned to Cameron. "You will serve 14 years in state prison," she said, "with eligibility for parole after 9 years. Restitution will be ordered in full, along with a permanent ban from working in finance or legal affairs." He didn't argue. He didn't weep. He just nodded, lips pressed together like he finally understood that silence was all he had left. Afterwards, Emma and I sat on the courthouse steps, sipping lukewarm coffee from a vendor across the street. "It's done," she said softly. "Almost," I said. She looked at me. "The Hartley Fund launches next month," I added. Emma blinked. "You're starting a fund." "We are," I said. "It's in both our names. You'll be the public face of it, the next generation of fighters." She started crying, quietly, not with drama, but with relief, with release. "I never thought I'd end up here," she said. "Neither did I said, "but maybe that's what survival looks like. Not just getting out, but turning around, holding up a light, and helping someone else get free, too." The official launch of the Hartley Fund felt more like a family reunion than a nonprofit event, except the family included lawyers, advocates, trauma counselors, and 3 women who hugged me like I'd pulled them out of a burning building. Which, in a way, I had. We held the event at the downtown Civic Center. Carol insisted on fresh flowers, soft lighting, and coffee strong enough to raise the dead. Emma stood beside me in a crisp navy blazer, hair pulled back, eyes clear. She hadn't just rebuilt, she was rising. The room filled slowly survivors, social workers, a few skeptical reporters, and I realized something. I wasn't nervous. I'd spent too long being underestimated to feel fear now.
"Ready?" Carol whispered.
I nodded and stepped up to the mic.
"Good evening," I said, my voice steady, my palms dry. "I'm Sylvia Hartley, and I'm not here because I wanted to be. I'm here because someone thought I was weak."
That got the room quiet. I scanned the crowd and let them see it: the silver hair, the soft blouse, the sensible shoes, everything they expected from someone who might need protection.
"But they were wrong," I continued. "And now, thanks to that mistake, we're building something that will make sure no one else suffers the way so many of us have." A few people clapped, others just nodded, but it was the kind of nod you give when truth hits like thunder.
"Predators don't wear fangs," I said. "They wear wedding rings, nice ties, familiar smiles. They use love as a tool, paperwork as a weapon, and concern as camouflage." I paused, letting it breathe.
"This fund won't stop every scam, but it will stop some, and for the people it helps. That might mean the difference between survival and surrender."
Emma came up next, and if I had fire, she had focus. "I used to think protecting my family meant keeping the peace," she said. "Now I know it means standing between them and anyone who means them harm. Even if that person once wore a tuxedo at my wedding." You could have heard a pin drop. After the speeches, people came in waves. Women thanking me, men asking how they could help, a sheriff's deputy handing me his card with "We need this in our county" written on the back. That night, as Emma and I sat at home with our shoes off and pie in our laps, she said something that caught me by surprise. "I want to do this full time," she said. I turned to her. "The fund?" "Yes, I want to quit my job. Use my voice, work with survivors, help train law enforcement, build something that matters." I smiled. "Then do it." She blinked. "Just like that?" "You don't need my permission, Emma. You need your own conviction. But if you're asking if I'll back you, the answer is absolutely yes." The next morning, I called Carol, put Emma on salary. She's joining full-time. Carol whooped into the phone like we'd just won the lottery. Over the next few months, the fund grew faster than we'd dreamed. Donations poured in. Other cities wanted us to expand. We hired attorneys, trauma counselors, volunteers, each with their own story, their own fire. And the letters kept coming. I thought I was alone. I didn't realize it was abuse until I heard your story. "My son did this to me. I don't know what to do." We responded to every single one, personally, when possible. Emma handled most of them now, with the kind of empathy that comes from hard-earned clarity. And then, one Tuesday, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman in her 50s, well-dressed, nervous. "Mrs. Hartley." "Yes." She held out a letter. "My mother wanted me to give you this. She passed away last month."
I took it gently, heart-catching. "I'm so sorry."
She said your story gave her the courage to rewrite her will and protect her estate. She wanted to die knowing her grandchildren would be taken care of, not stolen from. My throat closed up.
"Thank you," the woman said, pressing my hand, "for everything."
After she left, I sat on the porch with that letter in my lap, unopened. The wind rustled through the trees like a soft exhale. Somewhere across town, Emma was giving a presentation to social workers about recognizing signs of coercion. Carol was in Washington meeting with a senator's office. The fund was helping its 200th client. And I, once the invisible woman behind the flower arrangement at table 12, was now the reason hundreds of others would never be hidden again. I opened the letter. It was short, just 3 sentences. "You saved my life in more ways than one. I hope you never stop biting back. With all my gratitude, June." I closed the letter, smiled, and whispered to the wind. "Never, June, not a chance." The requests started pouring in right after the article in the Times. One week, I was the widow who refused to be scammed. The next, I was the keynote speaker for a law enforcement symposium in Denver. "You do realize," Emma said as we packed for the trip, You've become the unofficial face of anti-elder fraud justice. Well, I said, slipping a blazer into my suitcase. I suppose if someone has to scare predators out of their cashmere loafers, it might as well be me. She laughed. You're terrifying, Mom. I aim to please. The conference was bigger than I expected. Hundreds of officers, detectives, prosecutors. Carol met us there and whisked us through security like we were royalty. She'd printed Widow of the Year across my name badge. I rolled my eyes. She winked. You've got 10 minutes, she whispered backstage. Keep it real. Keep it punchy. I nodded, always. When I stepped on stage, the lights were so bright I couldn't see the crowd. Just a sea of uniforms and blinking tablets. I took a deep breath. Good morning. I'm Sylvia Hartley. You may know me as the woman who turned her predatory son-in-law into the poster boy for federal fraud sentencing. That got a laugh tight and surprised. I had their attention. But I'm not here to tell war stories. I'm here because you're the front line. You're the ones who hear the quiet panic in a widow's voice. You're the ones who notice when the bank withdrawals start getting strange. You're the ones who can stop the next Sylvia Hartley from ever needing to become a threat. Silence again. I've learned something the hard way when people stop listening to older women. We get louder. But wouldn't it be better if we didn't have to shout to be heard? They were with me now. I could feel it. Ask questions. Follow hunches. Don't let the word family make you ignore your instincts. Sometimes, the people closest to us are the ones we most need protection from. By the end, I got a standing ovation, the kind that felt earned. As I stepped off stage, a detective in her 50s stopped me. My mother, she said quietly, she lost everything to a cousin with power of attorney. I wish I'd known how to help. You're helping now, I said. She nodded, eyes glassy. That night, Emma and I walked through downtown Denver under a sky so clear it looked painted. I think, she said, linking her arm through mine, you were always meant for this. For what? For fighting the right war at the right time. I paused. That sounds suspiciously like something your father would have said. Emma smiled. Maybe he's rubbing off on me. Later, in the hotel room, I reviewed the pile of requests Carol had handed me. Cities, counties, task forces. Everyone wanted training. Everyone wanted to know how we'd done it. But one letter stood out. It wasn't typed. It wasn't from an agency. It was written in neat cursive on stationery that smelled faintly of lilacs. Dear Mrs. Hartley, my name is Joan Simmons. I'm 83 and I live alone in a small town in Iowa. My nephew recently asked me to sign some documents I didn't understand. When I refused, he got angry. I was afraid. Then I saw you on television. You reminded me I still have power. I called a lawyer. I took back control. I'm writing to say thank you. Also, I baked you cookies. They're in a separate box. Please don't eat them if they smell like onions. I ran out of labels. Sincerely, Joan. I laughed until I cried. The next day, I mailed Joan a handwritten reply and a thank you card with a photo of my garden. Emma added a post-it. Your cookies are a hit. No onions detected. Back home, we found Carol already sketching out a plan to expand our fund's footprint into rural areas. Urban centers get all the attention, she said, but small towns are where predators thrive quietly. They hide behind family. I nodded. Let's fix that. We launched the Firelight Project, a warm name for a sharp mission. Workshops, legal clinics, emergency hotlines. It rolled out across 12 counties in 2 months. And the stories started pouring in again. I thought it was just me. My niece was stealing from me while smiling at Sunday dinner. I trusted him. He was my godson. One woman called just to say thank you. I didn't know I was allowed to say no. That one stayed with me. I didn't know I was allowed to say no. That was it, wasn't it? That's what predators count on: our silence, our hesitation, our guilt. I wasn't silent anymore. Neither was Emma. And thanks to Joan Simmons and her cookies, we had enough sugar to keep going for weeks. The week after Denver, something unexpected landed in my mailbox, a cream-colored envelope with the White House seal. I'd been invited to attend a roundtable on elder protection policy, hosted by the First Lady herself. Emma nearly dropped her coffee. Mom, you're meeting the First Lady of the United States. I mean, I suppose she's welcome to pick my brain, I said, sipping my tea. Carol laughed so hard over the phone she snorted. Try not to rearrange the cabinet while you're there. It was scheduled for mid-April, cherry blossom season. I packed 3 blouses, a pair of sensible shoes, and Robert's cufflink pin, my lucky charm. When I arrived at the White House, Secret Service gave me the full sweep, including a very polite dog named Ranger who sniffed my luggage and wagged his tail like I'd packed steak instead of travel shampoo. The East Wing was brighter than I expected. Lots of white, sunlight spilling over polished floors, and staff who moved with the quiet efficiency of people who handle emergencies in pearls and heels. There were 8 of us at the table: advocates, legal minds, 1 retired judge, and me, the First Lady, graceful and sharp-eyed, welcomed us with warmth. Mrs. Hartley, she said, I've been following your work. Your case shifted national conversation around elder exploitation. Well, I said, he picked the wrong widow. Laughter around the table, but hers was the most genuine. The discussion turned serious quickly. They wanted insights on legal loopholes, predatory guardianships, asset freezing protocols. I spoke plainly about how most victims didn't need sympathy. They needed a bulldog in heels with legal teeth. What you're doing, the First Lady said, is what government should have done years ago. Afterward, she pulled me aside. There's talk, she said, lowering her voice, about a Presidential Medal of Freedom nomination. I blinked. Me. You've saved more lives than most legislation ever will. I left the White House stunned. As I stepped into the spring air, pink petals drifting around me, I could almost hear Robert's voice. See, I told you you'd raise hell someday. Back home, I didn't mention the medal to anyone. Not yet. I wasn't in this for medals. But still, it stirred something in me. That same week, we received a panicked call from a woman named Lorraine in Tennessee. Her son-in-law had convinced her to consolidate assets and transfer her home for tax reasons. She'd signed the paperwork. Then he locked her out. He told me I was confused, that I'd agreed to everything. Carol and I sprung into action. Within 72 hours, we had a team on the ground, a temporary restraining order, and a local news segment that made her son-in-law look like a discount Bond villain. Emma called it the Tennessee Tango. We danced that man straight into legal hot water. The look on Lorraine's face when she stepped back into her home worth every hour. I thought I was stupid, she whispered. You're not. I told her. You were trusting. That's different. But now you're dangerous. And dangerous women take back their houses. Our hotline lit up after that. We started getting calls from people who'd seen the coverage. My cousin's trying to change my will. My church friend keeps offering to manage my money. My son moved in, and now I'm not allowed to drive. We trained volunteers to handle intake. We partnered with banks to flag suspicious activity. We even created a Power of Attorney explainer series, plain language. No legalese, just truth. And then, Marcus wrote again. I found the letter in the mailbox one morning. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. I stood in the kitchen, debating. Emma peeked in. Another one. I nodded. You going to read it? I sighed. Curiosity is a form of weakness. Or a strength, she said, walking away with a shrug. Depends what you do with what you find. I read it that night, under a dim lamp, with the fireplace crackling. Margaret, I know you don't owe me anything, not forgiveness, not acknowledgement, not a second thought. But I wanted you to know. I've been teaching in prison. Financial literacy classes for other inmates. Funny. Right? The guy who used to rob old ladies now tells people how to avoid debt. I still hate that I lost. But I hate more that I became someone who deserved to. You were smarter than me, stronger. And you didn't just beat me, you made me irrelevant. That's something. Marcus. I folded the letter neatly, placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond, but I didn't tear it up either. Maybe someday, when he's really changed, we'll talk. Or maybe not. Some lessons are better left as footnotes. The next morning, Emma and I sat side by side on my porch.
watching a pair of mourning doves build a nest on the edge of the gutter.
You know, she said, I used to think all your quiet strength talk was just folksy stuff you picked up from Grandma. I chuckled. It was. But sometimes, folksy stuff turns out to be tactical brilliance.
She sipped her tea. I want to help. Not just here and there. I want to do what you're doing full time.
I raised an eyebrow. You mean the hotline, the fraud network, the underground grandma army?
All of it, she said.
I've been volunteering with the task force in my county, and I think I've found my purpose.
I looked at her. Really looked. For the first time. She didn't seem like the woman who married a con man. She looked like someone who could unearth a criminal enterprise with a notepad and a magnifying glass.
Then I think you should meet with Carol. I said, we'll build a division for family education and survivor support. You'll lead it. Her eyes lit up with the kind of purpose I hadn't seen since she was a little girl performing backyard plays with a cardboard crown.
Are you sure?
Emma, I may have burned the first bridge, but you can build the next one. Stronger, wider, flame-proof. That week, we received a letter from a woman named Helen in Wisconsin. Her neighbor's nephew had started bringing groceries, then her mail, then somehow he was named on her bank account. Carol flagged it as a grooming pattern. I called Helen myself.
Tell me what's happening, I said gently.
Well, she said, her voice shaking. I think I'm being too suspicious. He's very polite. Helen, being polite and being predatory are not mutually exclusive. She paused. That's what I was afraid of. We got her connected to local support and helped revoke the financial permissions he'd slipped into her stack of birthday cards. She cried on the phone when we told her it was handled.
No one's ever fought for me before, she said.
You fought for you, I corrected. We just sent the paperwork.
That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked my house like it was a museum of memories, each lamp, rug, and shelf reminding me of Robert and the life we'd built.
I ended up in the attic, digging through boxes until I found what I was looking for. A photo, yellowed edges, taken on our 25th anniversary trip to Maine. Robert and I standing on a rocky cliff, wind in our hair, laughing like lunatics. He'd written on the back in his blocky handwriting, if anything happens to me, make sure you still laugh like this. I stared at it, smiling through tears. I'm laughing. Robert, I whispered, I promise.
The following week, Carol brought news from Washington.
They're going to name it the Hartley Act, she said, placing a manila folder on my kitchen table. It passed unanimously. Elder fraud is now a federal felony, mandatory minimum sentencing, asset recovery, lifetime financial supervision. I blinked. The Hartley Act. She nodded. You're now in the same category as people who got buildings and bridges named after them? Emma nearly fell off her chair. Mom, you're federal law now.
Does that come with a crown?
Carol grinned. You already wear it. The next day, a film crew arrived to record a documentary about our program. The producer, a young woman with thick glasses and a clipboard, asked, Can you describe your mission in one sentence?
I thought about it.
Yes, I said. We make sure no elderly person is ever told they imagined the betrayal they lived through. The final scene they filmed was of Emma and me walking on the beach. The producer asked, What would you say to Marcus Nat? I paused.
I'd say thank you. You tried to take everything from me, and because of that, I discovered I had more than I ever knew: strength, purpose, and enough fire to light 100 torches for others walking through dark places.
She nodded. That's perfect. No, I corrected. That's closure. The documentary aired on PBS the following month, and overnight, our hotline received over 10,000 calls. Grandmothers in Arizona, veterans in North Carolina, retirees in New York. Each voice carried hope and grief. And resolve? We hired 10 new staff. Emma led training. Carol flew to Washington to meet with the Department of Justice. I stayed home, answering letters by hand, one envelope at a time. Because when you wage war on predators, you don't just build an army, you build a legacy. 3 months after the Hartley Act passed, I found myself giving a keynote speech at the National Council on Aging's annual summit. The ballroom was full of people in smart blazers, glasses perched low on noses, clipboards at the ready. "Hey, everyone! Tonight we talk about what happens," I began, leaning gently into the mic, "when a predator picks the wrong widow and accidentally wakes up a network of furious, well-funded grandmas."
Laughter rolled through the room, but beneath it was a current of something stronger recognition. They knew exactly what I meant. Afterward, a line of attendees waited to speak with me. Some were researchers. Others were retired professionals. One woman in her 80s said, "I taught high school math for 40 years, got fooled by a neighbor's son who said he'd help me with online banking. I almost lost everything." "Almost," I said, shaking her hand. "That's the key word. And now you get to be part of helping someone else avoid that word entirely." She smiled, and her eyes had that steel I knew well, the kind that shows up when you've been underestimated too many times and finally decide to do something about it. Back home, I settled into my porch rocker with a cup of chamomile tea and a new journal. Carol had suggested I start documenting our methodology, how to spot early signs of manipulation, what language fraudsters use, the tactics they lean on like old crutches. So I wrote, "Step 1, if they call you sweetheart while asking for access to your savings, don't smile, hang up. Step 2, anyone who insists something is urgent probably doesn't have your best interest in mind. Step 3, trust your gut. If it sounds too helpful, it probably isn't." That weekend, Emma and I attended the ribbon cutting for the first Hartley Center for Elder Justice, a small but mighty brick building nestled beside a senior center in Des Moines. Inside, there were free legal clinics, support groups, therapy rooms, and tech training for seniors. As we toured the space, a volunteer named Carol Jean whispered, "They used to come in scared. Now they come in curious." That night, Emma and I had dinner with one of the center's first clients, a woman named Judy who'd narrowly avoided being coerced into signing over her home by her daughter's boyfriend. "I told him I needed time," Judy said, "and then I remembered hearing you on the radio. So I came here, and guess what? They found he had 3 restraining orders." Emma raised her glass. "To finding the truth before it costs everything." Judy toasted us back, eyes shining, to being a little scary when we need to be. Back at home, Carol called with a new opportunity. "Sylvia, the International Commission on Aging wants you to help draft an elder fraud framework for global use." I paused, startled. "You mean beyond the U.S.? "They want to adopt your model across the EU, Australia, and parts of Asia. We'd start with training law enforcement and policy drafters in 10 countries. I leaned back in my chair, letting that settle. From widowhood to worldwide legislation, that was not on my bingo card. "I'm in," I said, "but only if we bring Emma." Carol laughed. "Already planned." A week later, I sat on a plane for the first time in years. Paris was our first stop, followed by The Hague. Emma and I prepared presentations in cafes, scribbling on napkins between sips of espresso. "Do you realize what you've done, Mom?" Emma asked one morning as we walked along the Seine. I shook my head. "No, and that's probably what kept me brave enough to do it. You've made the world safer for people who never thought they had a voice." I took her hand, and you've become the voice that echoes long after mine. In The Hague, I gave a speech to the Global Forum on Financial Abuse. Afterward, a Swedish delegate in her 60s pulled me aside. "Do you know what the phrase Sylvia Hartley means in our office?" I smiled. "Please, tell me." "It means proceed with caution. The widow might be watching." That night, as Emma and I shared wine under string lights on a cafe patio, I asked her what she wanted to do next. "I want to lead the next phase," she said. "Education, prevention, teaching families how to spot red flags before it's too late." I nodded. "It's yours. I'll keep writing, keep speaking, but you'll build the next branch." She leaned over and clinked her glass against mine. "To daughters who learn, to mothers who fight." And somewhere deep inside me, I could feel Robert smiling. The plane touched down in Boston just after dusk, the sky glowing orange and lavender like it had been brushed on by someone with a sense of closure. We were back home, but nothing felt the same. Emma had already lined up her first public seminar series,
red flags and resilience, financial literacy for families. She'd be speaking at retirement communities, churches, even the occasional public library, and every single session was already booked. Carol called the day after we returned. "You're not going to believe this." "Try me," I said, balancing my phone between my shoulder and chin while sorting through a mail stack that included a surprising number of thank you cards from people I'd never met. "We've just been contacted by a documentary film crew, Netflix. Actually, they want to tell your story." I almost dropped the phone. "A documentary about me." "Well," Carol said with a smile in her voice. "Technically about the Hartley Act, the financial network takedown, the widow who made the FBI nervous in the best way. But yes, I'm not sure anyone wants to watch a 74-year-old woman drink tea while researching criminal statutes," I said, laughing. "Trust me," she replied. "They absolutely do." 2 weeks later, I found myself in a chair beneath soft studio lights. Makeup artist fluttering around me. Boom mic hovering like a patient bee. Across from me sat the interviewer, a woman named Sasha, who had the kind of voice that made you confess your darkest secrets just to hear her react. "Tell us," she said, her eyes warm and curious, "about the moment you realized Marcus Thornfield wasn't just a threat, but an opportunity." I paused, thinking. The first time he sat across from me and tried to sell me my own life under the guise of protection, I realized I had something rare. Not just money, but clarity. I saw what he was doing while he was doing it. Most people realize too late. "Were you ever afraid?" "Oh, constantly. But fear and resolve live in the same room. You just have to choose which one gets the bigger bed." Sasha smiled, scribbling in her notebook. Later, as we wrapped, the producer came over and said softly, "My grandmother lost her savings to a scam artist. She never spoke up. She was too ashamed. You've changed that." That hit me harder than I expected. Because that was the whole point, wasn't it? To make it so people didn't have to be ashamed for being targeted, but proud of speaking up. That weekend, I spoke at the Massachusetts Women's Leadership Forum. It was a room full of mayors, school board members, CEOs, and at least one woman who owned a chain of bakeries and could command a room better than any politician I'd ever met. "My name is Sylvia Hartley," I began, "and I'm not here today because I wanted to be. I'm here because I had to be, because someone tried to erase me quietly, and I decided to respond loudly." I walked them through the timeline again, but this time with more focus on what came after the resilience, the rebuilding, the strange empowerment that follows survival. Afterward, a young councilwoman from Ohio approached me with tears in her eyes. "My mom passed away 2 years ago. She didn't tell me she'd been manipulated by her financial advisor until it was too late. I wish she'd seen you speak." I took her hand. "Then let's make sure someone else's mom does." At home, I curled up in my reading chair with a new hardcover, Fury and Grace, the story of Sylvia Hartley. Emma had insisted the biography needed to be finished before the documentary aired. I wasn't so sure. The idea of strangers reading about my private thoughts made me twitchy, but as I turned the pages, I had to admit she and the ghostwriter had done a fine job. She'd even included the small things Robert's safe, the flower arrangement at the wedding, the way Marcus said protection, like he was selling snake oil in a polite bottle. And on the final page, she'd written, "Some people wait a lifetime for their moment of power. Sylvia Hartley didn't wait. She made her moment and shared it with the world." I closed the book and exhaled. The next morning, I received a call from the Department of Justice. "Sylvia, this is just an informal heads up," said the woman on the other end. "But you're on the shortlist for a Presidential Medal of Freedom." I nearly dropped my coffee. Again. "They're considering you for contributions to elder justice, policy reform, and nationwide impact on criminal fraud prosecution." I blinked. "For doing what I had to do?" She laughed. "Sometimes the people who do the most good never went looking for a spotlight. It found them." Emma came over that evening. She brought champagne, just in case. We sat on the back deck watching the stars rise and the ocean sigh against the shore. "Do you realize, Mom," she said,
That you might be the only person who got revenge, justice, and legacy in one move?
I smiled. Well, I was aiming for survival. The rest was bonus.
She took my hand. What would you say to women listening right now? Women who think they're too old, or too tired, or too alone to fight. I turned toward her and said simply, "You're not too old, you're not too late, and you are never, ever too small to change the story someone is trying to write for you." The news broke on a breezy Thursday afternoon. Sylvia Hartley had been officially nominated for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I was trimming lavender in my backyard garden when Emma burst through the gate like a kid who'd just been picked for prom queen. She had her phone in one hand and a folded-up Boston Globe in the other. "They've confirmed it," she yelled before even reaching the patio. "It's on every wire service. You're going to Washington." I smiled and wiped my hands on my apron. I suppose I should buy something that doesn't smell like rosemary and fertilizer. Emma was bouncing like she'd won the lottery, and in a way, we both had. Because this wasn't just about a medal. This was about making noise in places that had once ignored whispers from the elderly. It was about power, real, structural, long-lasting power for people who'd been silenced or sidelined their entire lives. That evening, I sat down to write my speech. Not for the White House. Not yet. This one was for a different stage. A town hall in Springfield was hosting a public forum on elder fraud prevention. I'd been asked to open the event, and I wanted to get it right. My notepad stared at me, empty for far too long. So I did what Robert always used to tell me. Start with the truth and dress it up later. So I wrote, "My name is Sylvia Hartley, and someone once tried to erase me quietly. I responded loudly and with lawyers." That felt about right. The next few days were a blur of interviews, policy briefings, and late-night conversations with Carol and Emma. Our little program, the one Robert's money had quietly funded, was now being scaled up nationally, with state partners in 38 out of 50 states. More prosecutors, more advocates, more elderly people learning how to sniff out snakes in silk suits. We even partnered with a fintech startup to develop a simple tool called GrayGuard, an app designed to flag suspicious financial activity and alert both users and a trusted contact. It was sleek, easy to use, and already saving people from losing their homes. But amidst the excitement, I still thought about Marcus. He was due for another parole hearing in 3 years. Part of me wanted to ignore it, pretend it didn't matter anymore. But deep down, I knew I'd be there. Not out of vengeance, out of duty, because justice requires maintenance. One morning, I got a letter from a woman named Judith in Michigan. She was 82 and had nearly lost her savings to a fake investment advisor who promised her monthly gains with zero risk. She wrote, "I recognized the tactic because I saw your interview." I paused. I asked questions. I called my grandson and showed him the contract. He found the fraud within 5 minutes. "You saved me, and I've never even met you." I wept reading that letter. Because it meant all of this, every hearing, every lawsuit, every whisper I turned into a roar, it all meant something real. Emma started joining the task force full-time. She took over part of the educational outreach and worked closely with prosecutors to help victims rebuild their lives. Turns out, she told me one night over pasta and red wine, "I'm really good at being annoying to predators." "I'm not surprised." I said, "You were a teenager once." She stuck her tongue out, then lifted her glass. "To turning inherited guilt into generational power?" I clinked hers. "To scaring con artists so badly they switched to legitimate jobs?" We laughed until we couldn't breathe. Then came the White House invitation. Heavy cardstock, gold trim, the presidential seal glinting at the top. "Mrs. Sylvia Hartley, you are cordially invited to the Medal of Freedom ceremony at the White House East Room." I ran my fingers over the embossing, remembering the first time Marcus called me vulnerable. He had no idea what he'd awakened. On the day of the ceremony, I wore the same navy suit I'd worn to testify before the Senate. Robert's earrings sparkled beneath the chandeliers. Emma stood beside me, calm and proud. When the president called my name, the room erupted. He placed the medal around my neck and leaned in. "Mrs. Hartley?" he said softly.
You made predators afraid. That's a national service if I've ever seen one.
The cameras flashed, the applause swelled, and for just a moment, I let myself feel the full weight of it.
Not just the medal, but everything it meant.
This journey had started behind a flower arrangement at a wedding, where I'd been seated like an afterthought. Tonight, I stood at the center of the most powerful room in the country. A widow, a warrior, a warning. That night, back in my quiet home by the sea, I sat on the porch and let the ocean speak to me in soft syllables.
I thought about Robert.
Your money didn't just buy revenge, I whispered into the dark. It bought revolution.
Then I turned out the light, sipped my tea, and smiled into the night. Because somewhere out there, another predator was second-guessing himself. And that, my friends, is how you know justice is working. Hey everyone, if you've made it this far, you're probably feeling what I'm feeling, like we've just traveled a long, winding road together, one full of traps, triumphs, and quiet victories.
There's something about stories like this about resilience, about fighting back when no one expects you to, about refusing to become someone else's casualty that settles in the soul and stays there for a while.
So before we drift off tonight, let me offer this.
Not every battle is loud, not every victory is visible, and not every hero wears armor or carries a sword. Sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is say no in a room full of people expecting silence.
Sometimes, survival is an act of rebellion, and rebuilding is an act of defiance. Sylvia Hartley didn't start out looking for justice. She just wanted peace. But peace, it turns out, sometimes needs to be earned. And sometimes, peace wears pearls and carries legal documents sharper than knives. So if someone ever calls you too old or too vulnerable or too much trouble, just smile.
They clearly haven't learned what happens when they underestimate someone with nothing to lose and everything to protect. Thank you for staying with me tonight. And if this story stirred something in you, share it.
Let someone else know they're not alone, that there's strength in silence, and even more, in breaking it. Now, turn out the lights. Let the hum of the night wrap around you like a blanket. You're safe here. You're stronger than you think.
And you're never, ever too late to fight back.